Hello. Hello, everyone. I would like you all to welcome to the stage a very special guest, the Mighty Jingles.
Hello, everyone.
So, there's a lot of anime that involves a lot of warships,
You noticed that, did you?
especially World War II warships. What's the fascination with World War II and ships in Japan?
Right. Okay. Well, the first question that I wanted to ask was for everybody who actually sitting here, and I'm terribly sorry, it's not actually related to what you just asked me, but come on, be honest. Who's sitting here because they want to see the show? And who's sitting here because, oh look, seats that nobody's sitting in? There we see, yeah, at least they're honest. Well, hopefully you'll be entertained anyway. So, yeah, what is the fascination with anime and World War II warships in particular? Hang on. Diva wants to say something. No, never mind.
You're not nerfing this.
Because it's kind of breaking its way into the mainstream lately. I mean, you've got Arpeggio of Blue Steel has got the crossover into warships. Girls and Panzer, obviously. Big crossover into World of Tanks on the
Yes.
Asian server. What else is there? Oh, Kantai Collection. Aren't War Thunder doing something with
Yes,
them?
they are. I think it's just some skins.
Well, there's just going to be skins for the tanks and the ships. Well, not the tanks, obviously. It's Kantai Collection. So you never really see anything. What is it with the warships? Oh, don't worry, we'll be asking questions later. What is it with the warships rather than, I mean, why the Japanese Navy? Why not the Japanese Army? You never see any anime shows related to the Army in World War II. You never see any anime shows related to the Air Force in World War II. And I think there's a reason for that, and it's probably not going to be terribly popular because we all love everything Japanese here, don't we? Unfortunately, the Japanese Army doesn't have an awful lot to be proud of from the Second World War. Whereas the Navy kind of does. And yet, we've got Girls and Panzer with the whole tank thing, but how many Japanese tanks are actually in Girls and Panzer? They've got two. They've got the Type 89, which is technically a medium tank, but would be a light tank by anybody else's standards. And have you noticed every time the Type 89 fires at anything, when does it ever kill anything? It's crap. And then, of course, there's the other tank. Now, there's a bit of a cross-up. They never actually specifically refer to it in Girls and Panzer, but I think it's the Cheeto, and it's crewed by the members of, well, they play a certain online tank game. They never actually say World of Tanks, do they? But you see them playing this game that looks suspiciously like World of Tanks. And they're also incredibly crap. Anytime that tank goes out into battle, they're always either the first one knocked out, or they get lost, or they wreck the tank. So the whole Second World War Japanese thing, as far as the Army's concerned, I think with the Army, they've got to... They'd rather not remember what the Army did in the Second World War with the systematic brutality and so on and so on. But the Navy, on the other hand, while there were certainly some incidents, there were with every military during World War II, they can generally be proud of what the Navy did. And they can look back on it without that sense of shame that they feel at the atrocities that the Army committed. And so you've got this kind of fascination with one of the only things that the Japan is capable of being proud of with regards to the Second World War. Because, let's face it, I mean, the Yamato.
Ah, yes,
I
the
mean,
big
there's-
elephant in the room.
Yeah, there's never been another ship like, there never will be another ship like, well, except, all right, actually,
Will
Jingles,
we get the nice footage of Yamato in the background?
we do.
please?
We got some,
We do have a specific one.
we do have some rare footage of the Yamato exiting Kure Harbour, which will be coming up at some point.
There we go. Actually,
It's coming.
Battle Space Ship Yamato was made a bit in response to the feelings that Japan had in the 70s of defeat.
Yes.
So the whole thing of Yamato, the premise of the show was the actual ship Yamato was brought back, rebuilt, and turned into a space spaceship to go into space and save Earth. That was really popular and still is a hit in Japan these days because it gave them a sense of feeling proud in something big they achieved. And
Because
because
nobody-
Yamato is very special, isn't it?
Well, nobody had ever built a ship that size, except from the Japanese, because they built two of them. A sister ship, the Mutsuki. The Musashi, not the Mutsuki. What am I talking about? Entirely different class of ship. But the thing was, I mean, the Yamato never really saw combat until the day it was sunk, and it was sent on a suicide mission because it was just sent out with enough fuel to get to its target and no further. The idea was that if it was unsuccessful in its mission, it would run itself aground and basically be a fortification on the coast. Its sister ship, however, the Musashi, did see some pretty impressive action. Has anybody ever heard of the Battle of Taffy 3? Yeah? That was amazing. Basically what happened, two Japanese forces were attacked. I can't remember, I think it might have been the Solomons. Correct me if I'm wrong. Anyway, or the Philippines, whatever, somewhere in the South Pacific. The Americans were landing the Marines on the beaches and the Japanese needed to stop the landings. So they came up with a pretty ingenious plan. They sent their carriers off as a distraction, and Admiral Bill Halsey fell for it, and he took all of his carriers and battleships chasing the surviving Japanese carriers, the only carriers Japan had left at that stage. Coming up from the south was the Musashi, 8 heavy cruisers, 3 other battleships, 30 destroyers. And the only thing the Americans had to protect the Marines' landing was a carrier escort group. Now, don't get carried away by the idea that I said carrier here. These were escort carriers. Right? They were basically cargo ships with a flight deck on top. They carried like anything between 8 and 13 aircraft. Those escort carriers, I mean, America was producing they were producing one of these escort carriers every week by 1944. There was no way Japan were ever going to beat them unless they knocked them out in the early stages of the war. These escort carriers were guarded by a bunch of destroyers and destroyer escorts. Now, a destroyer escort isn't even as big as a destroyer. A Corvette looks big next to a destroyer escort. So, this was known as Task Force 3, and it's gone down in history as Taffy 3. That was the abbreviation for it. When these guys saw the Yamato sister ship, 4 other battleships, 8 heavy cruisers, and 30 destroyers steaming at them from the south, the logical thing to do would be to turn around and run away. Well, the escort carriers did that, but the destroyer escorts attacked the Musashi. The Japanese could not believe what they were seeing. They were so surprised by this, they assumed these guys have to be mad. They're either mad or they know something we don't know. And they assumed that the destroyer escorts were coming in to fire off torpedoes because the battleships and cruisers were about to appear over the horizon. They weren't. They were 300 miles further off to the north chasing the decoy carrier group. And these guys actually chased away. Just to put this into perspective for you, the Musashi weighed more, just the Musashi weighed more than the entire task force that it was chasing after. And while they didn't sink the Musashi, honestly, I think they lost 1 of the escort carriers, 2 of the destroyer escorts, and 1 of the destroyers. The carrier were launching their aircraft in ports of the marine landings, so they had no armor-piercing bombs. Were loaded with high explosive because they were supposed to be attacking positions ashore. Things got so desperate that the fighter pilots were trying to machine gun the torpedoes that were being launched by the Japanese destroyers. They were just throwing everything they had at these things. And they put such a fear of God into this Japanese task force that the Admiral thought it's a trap. He did an Admiral Akbar, basically. Turned around, sailed away. And I think something like 7 Congressional Medal of Honors, most of them posthumous, were awarded to the members of Task Force 3 that time. But there's actions like that. There's the final battle of the Yamato. Actually, I don't know if you're aware, the Yamato had one of the most powerful anti-aircraft armaments. The Japanese had learned, in fact, the Japanese were the people that taught everybody that warships need to be afraid of aircraft. And so the Yamato had a very, very powerful anti-aircraft armament, but the problem was, the various different calibers of anti-aircraft guns had a sort of minimum and maximum effective range. And there was a gap around about, I think, between 3 and 5 kilometers out, where the heavier caliber anti-aircraft guns couldn't really get the minimum range, and the medium caliber anti-aircraft guns couldn't get the maximum range. And if you were in a torpedo bomber in that 3 to 5 kilometer range, you probably weren't going to get shot down, as they found out to their cost on that day when they went on their final mission. And yet, you look at the amount of games that have come out, games and TV shows, obviously Arpeggio, Blue Steel. I have to confess, I've only ever seen the first episode. I'm more of a Kantai collection man myself. Come on, Arpeggio fans, who's here? Yeah, it is a good show. I'm not saying it's a bad show. No, it is a good show, but it's not really for me.
As you point out in Kantai Collection, a lot of the jokes they make with them, like you're seeing there, a lot of the jokes are actually references to historical facts, like the fact that Yamato doesn't like being called a hotel. That's
Yes.
because she essentially was a big standing hotel.
Yeah, that was the nickname for the Yamato during World War II. The Japanese actually called her the Hotel Yamato because she spent more time in harbour than at sea. But for me, Kantai Collection, while I've tried to play the game, but just trying to get past the whole language barrier. There are various different extensions you can download for your browser, and I can't get any of them to work. So I have tried to play the game, and I have watched a couple of episodes of the TV show. And I'm not judging anybody, right? I'm not judging anybody who likes Kantai Collection because the characters are fantastic. I absolutely adore the characters, particularly the Kongo sisters and the Yamato. But it's the fan service that I really can't, it's just not for me. So I tend to enjoy it more because of the characters, and particularly the collectibles that you can get. Yesterday I bought a little Nendoroid of the Akagi and the Kaga, and it's adorable. But if you buy them together, you get the little tea table. So they're sitting around drinking tea, and it's just, I know, I'm a 46-year-old man and I'm collecting dolls. But the thing is, yeah, you know exactly, I don't have to be ashamed of it in here. But for me, Kantai Collection, definitely. The characters and the character design. I mean, the Kongo sisters are just batshit crazy and absolutely adorable. And of course, we've got Kirishima down here. Stand up, show them. Kirishima is my waifu.
Sorry.
That's it. Sorry, Rita. I found a better option. Yeah.
Yeah. Concluding the Yamato. Yamato, for those who don't know, was actually another name that we used to refer to Japan. So, in a way, when Yamato was defeated, that was it. It was seen as a defeat of Japan.
Yeah, the Japanese didn't tend to take their omens very seriously, didn't they?
Now, going to another scene that is also rather popular, the Congo class.
Oh, yes.
The Congos. What makes the Congos so special?
Well, I have a theory about that. The Japanese Navy was, certainly at the beginning of the Second World War, one of the most powerful navies in the world. And who built their ships? Yeah, that's right, it was us. Arming the world since the 1700s. Yeah, because the Congo obviously was built in Britain. And that's what they say about the Congo, built in Britain and raised in Japan.
But not her sisters.
No, the sister ships were all built in Japan, but they were built as battle cruisers, not battleships, and they were extensively modified between the wars. By the time of the Second World War, she was a fast battleship. Not as heavily armoured as something like the Nagato, for example, but certainly had firepower and speed. And of course, Japan learned to build ships based off the designs that the British were doing. We basically built most of the ships that the Japanese were building, because it was a big thing of international prestige. If you had the industry and the resources to build and maintain a fleet of battleships, we're talking in the 19th, or even the 18th, 19th and earlier 20th century, you were considered to have made it. You're one of the big guys on the world stage. And so Japan were very obviously keen to get as much expertise as they possibly could from us in order to start their own shipbuilding projects. And oh boy, did they, as the Americans obviously found out to their cost in 1941.
However, the Congo class was the most active class of battleships during World War II, wasn't it?
I believe it was, yes. I'm not entirely sure of the figures, but the Congos were, at least one of the Congos was in, I think, every major Pacific surface battle during World War II. At least one of the Congos.
And in 1935, Hiei became the flagship of the Emperor as well.
I did not know that. There we go. There you have something to be very proud of.
So,
Do we have? Oh, we have more. Sorry, go for it.
Oh, yeah. Going through the ones that are quite talked about in a lot of the shows, the Fubuki class as well.
The Fubuki, yes. I'm actually quite sad.
Mighty destroyers.
I love destroyers. Obviously, I play World of Warships, and I love the destroyers and the cruisers most in World of Warships, although I'm starting getting the battleships again lately. And I'm actually quite sad because I've only managed to make it as far as tier 7. Who plays World of Warships here? Yeah? Wow, that's a lot of you. So you know what they're doing with the Japanese destroyers, don't you? They're introducing the second line. They're putting the Mitsuki back to tier 5. They're making it the other tier 5 with the Minakaze. And then the Hatsuharu is moving down to tier 6. The Fubuki's moving down to tier 7. Well, I'm that far away from unlocking the Fubuki. So, I mean, I don't know what they're going to do because, I mean, at the moment I have a tier 7 Japanese destroyer, the Hatsuharu, and I kind of like it. It's not great, but it's not bad. That's going to suddenly become a tier 6. All right, are they going to give me the experience that I've missed out on, or are they going to give me the Hatsuharu at tier 6 and then give me the new Fubuki at tier? I don't know. But the Fubuki is the character in Kantai Collection.
Yes.
Fubuki tries her best. That's the slogan, isn't it? I must admit, I was looking forward to getting that ship in World of Warships, but I don't know how long it's going to take me now.
Probably, I guess, because she was the first modern destroyer to be built.
That's right, yes.
And she kind of set the standards
they called
for
it
all the others.
Yeah, they called it the special class destroyer. Because previously the Japanese destroyers had either just been dedicated torpedo boats or kind of light cruisers, but not quite cruisers, as flagships for destroyer squadrons. And the designs at all were pretty much First World War designs. The Fubuki was the first real modern design destroyer, specially built for World War II. I'm not sure how many of them they built, but there was a fair number. I mean, they were the backbone of the destroyer fleet by the end of the war.
They were rather, I believe they were
In
popular.
fact, going back to the Battle of Taffy 3, I believe that the Fubuki herself was the one that finally sank the William E. Porter destroyer escort that had managed to torpedo the Musashi. The ship was going down and its guns were still firing. And the Fubuki sailed alongside and the crew lined the side of the ship and saluted as they went past. I'm pretty sure you can all, of course, Google it and tell me that I'm wrong afterwards, as I'm sure many of you are already doing now. But yeah, I'm almost certainly wrong, but I have heard that.
As we're talking about destroyers, has anyone here has watched High School Fleet?
Yes. It's basically Girls and Panzer with ships, isn't it?
Pretty much. The main ship actually never existed, but it was based on the Kagero class.
On the Kagero, which, currently World of Warships, Japanese Tier 9. Probably not going to be a Japanese Tier 9 this time next month.
It's also one of the most numerous ones.
Yes. A very modern design, comparatively compared to, the rest of the stuff that Japan had available in World War II. But, I mean, it's the popularity. Because, I mean, Kantai Collection, for example, started off as a web browser game. And I don't think they're just visual novels, manga, anime, TV shows. There's a movie in the works, various different game. It's really, really caught on. I mean, it's not quite become mainstream, but it's getting there. And you've got all these tie-ins with the various different shows that are, I mean, World of Tanks, for example. World of Tanks Asia has got the whole Girls and Panzer thing going. World of Tanks has got 40 million users worldwide. It's 5 times more popular than World of Warcraft. You don't get much more mainstream than that.
And there's the big Fleet of Fog that you can get.
Yes, the Fleet of Fog for World of Warships. But here's the thing, because anime fans were kind of a weird bunch, really. We like being thought of as, we've got that niche enthusiasm for anime. And other people who don't get it, well, it's almost as if I can't help but get the feeling that, okay, it's good that more people are getting into shows like Arpeggio Blue Steel, Kantai Collection, High Fury, whatever it might be. But I can't help but get the feeling that at the back of our minds, the anime fans are going, I was there first. You don't really want it to go mainstream because there's a sort of, you've been looked down on for being anime fans for so long that now you wear it as a badge of pride. And, you don't really want people talking about Arpeggio or Blue Steel in the same breath as the Coventry football match on the weekend. That's our thing. Leave it to us. Yes? No? Are you happy with the idea of anime? Okay, here's the thing. Let's say Saturday night TV schedule was X Factor, followed by Kantai Collection. Would you be happy with that? Do you think it would ever happen? No. But you would be happy So you actually don't mind the whole idea of anime becoming more and more mainstream. You don't want it to be a niche little thing that's special just for you. You know? Well done to you. It's a very, very, very progressive attitude, I must say.
The real problem is, a lot of us wouldn't mind if it was more mainstream, as long as people stop looking down on us anyway.
Ah, yes.
Because there's always
very good point. A lot of us wouldn't matter if it was, wouldn't mind if anime and a lot of anime became more mainstream, as long as people didn't look down on you for it at the same time. Yeah.
I think there's one we haven't touched yet, as we're talking about Arpeggio. The Yona, she's based on the I-400 submarine.
Oh, right.
Can you tell us
I've
anything
only
about
seen
them?
the first episode of Arpeggio.
Well,
I do know the character, but Arpeggio is not one of my favourites, I have to admit. Sorry, Arpeggio fans. It's all right. You can catch me outside and give me a good kicking after the show. I won't hold it against you.
Yeah, the Yona, she's based on the I-400 submarine class of World War II, who was the only submarine aircraft carrier to be used in service.
Ah, yeah, that's right. Yes, they were designed to carry aircraft, weren't they?
Yes, they were also planned to attack the Panama Canal as bombing America with a dirty bomb. Only 3 of them were ever made, and were all captured, analyzed, and then destroyed by the Americans. So they won't fall on Russian hands.
Oh, God, yeah. Actually, it's quite... speaking of the Americans and the whole... Because with the... Again, sorry, I'm dragging you slightly off topic here, but going back to World War II, with the kind of suffering that was inflicted on the Americans by the Japanese, and I'm not just talking about in combat, obviously, with the treatment of captured troops, and obviously any bomber crews that were shot down over Japan got used for bayonet practice, and so on and so on and so on. You would have thought that America would have been a bit more... I mean, look at the treatment that was given to Germany at the end of the Second World War. And in some cases, the Japanese in mainland China made the Nazis look like Boy Scouts. If you have a look at the casualty figures suffered by both military and civilians, obviously the big number one is Russia. Suffered more casualties than anybody else. But the number 2 is China. Not a lot of people know that, and that's at the hands of the 1 million Japanese troops who were in China 10 years before the Second World War started, and all the way through the Second World War. And the Americans, of course, obviously the Marines suffered horribly through the Ireland campaigns. You would have thought that the Americans, when they were dictating peace terms to the Japanese, would have been a little bit rougher than they were. And what surprised me the most was it was General Douglas MacArthur, who he basically insisted that they treat the Japanese leniently and rehabilitate them rather than punish them the way they were punishing the Germans, which I thought was amazingly surprising given his attitude to the Japanese throughout the war. It was no prisoners taken, and yet it was largely because of him that Japan emerged as such a successful industrial nation in the post-war years. Sorry, I'll get my teeth into a subject and I'll just...
Although...
Oh, it's the Yamato.
Yes,
how much damage has he done?
It all comes back to the Yamato, doesn't it?
Do you know, I think I might have put this game on YouTube. It's looking very familiar. I think this might be from one of my videos.
No, this was, I think that this was a custom, no.
Oh, this one apparently has a Yamato ramming an Iowa. And I think that's hilarious. Seriously, who gets rammed by a Yamato? It's not like you can't see it coming. It's the biggest ship in the world. Well, it's not the biggest ship in the world anymore, is it? It's certainly not a World of Warships. German Tier 10 battleship. Complete work of fantasy. Bigger than the Yamato. And we don't like that. Anyway, what's next?
Anyone has any questions for Jingles?
Yeah, let's throw it up into a Q&A.
Let's start from one side.
I'll park my fat, lazy old ass down and we'll answer some questions.
Let's go.
Have you heard of strike witches? It's basically girls as airplanes.
I have heard of strike witches, and it was when I was getting into Girls and Panzer. I have to admit that the characters in Girls and Panzer, with the exception of Yukari, are pretty boring. You know, they're your typical Japanese high school TV show stereotypes. But the tank battles in Girls and Panzer really made it for me, and I thought, this is awesome. I'll have a look around and see if there's anything else. And of course, the first thing that I saw was Strike Witches. And I had a look at the pictures and the character designs, and I thought, this looks amazing. Now, I'm not judging anybody who likes Strike Witches.
Yes, you are.
But
Choice of words there.
within
Choice
the
of words
first
there.
minute, I was like, will these girls please put some pants on? So, yeah, I like the idea, and I did like the character designs, but it was just a little bit too much for me. But, you know, I'm not judging. That's the whole thing about anime. You know, we accept that it is weird. I mean, have you ever tried to explain the plot of an anime show to somebody who doesn't watch anime? Do you find yourself halfway through just going, look, it's just Japanese? Yeah, exactly. So we don't judge each other, you know. Who's next?
Can I be cheeky and sneak in two? Because the first is, I wonder, after what you were saying about the Japanese, if part of the reason we were lenient is we felt guilty about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the
entirely
second
possible.
is, how are you finding RN cruisers? Because I'm not having fun. Except
Yeah.
for Belfast.
Yeah.
Leandro
Yeah, that's-
is amazing.
That is not a... Again, I mean, you know, there's so many different opinions on the whole subject from people who actually are paid to research history, unlike me. Yes, it's entirely possible that there was a certain... Okay, you know, we're accusing them of all these kinds of atrocities, and yet we just dropped atom bombs on 2 civilian cities. Maybe we should take it easy here. But at the same time, Douglas MacArthur was basically... I don't know if you've ever read about this guy, but he just did not like being told what to do by presidents. He was the... If you thought Patton was an egomaniac, he was nothing compared to Douglas MacArthur. And this guy... MacArthur was all about securing MacArthur's place in history. And it's entirely possible that he thought this was the way to do it. You know, for good reason or bad reason, he did the right thing. As for your second question, the British cruisers and World of Warships, yes. I freely admit that the tier... I mean, nobody cares about the Tier 1, but the Tier 3, 4, and possibly the Tier 5 are very difficult to do well in. Once you get up... You see, Wargaming have said that they're for people who are not noobs. You can't just, okay, install World of Warships, start playing the British cruisers, which, let's face it, most people in this room, if you started playing World of Warships, you'd start playing the British cruisers, because we're British. That would be a bad idea. Because those things explode when they get hit, and it takes a while for them to do any kind of damage. They are definitely experienced players only. It's not like playing a battleship, where to an extent you can just angle your armour and take a kicking. It's not like playing other cruisers, where they have some kind of armour, and all right, a battleship's going to beat the crap out of you, but you can angle your armour against a Soviet destroyer or another cruiser and be able to weather some kind of damage while you get out of there. You cannot do that in a British cruiser. You need to know where you're going, what you're going to do when you get there, and how you're going to get out of there afterwards. I see a lot of people send in replays in British cruisers where they have an amazing first 5 minutes of the game, and then their smoke screen dies, and they're sitting in the middle of open water with nowhere to go. And they said, this game would have been great up until the first 5 minutes. And it's a thing in British cruisers and World of Warships. It's not just knowing where to be and what you're going to do when you get there. You need to know how you're going to get out of there without dying as well. Always have to have an exit strategy. I apologise if this is very boring for anybody who does not play World of Warships. Who's next?
So, can you explain to me how people can find battleships fun to play in World of Warships? I mean... yeah.
Well, you see, you've never scored a citadel on a cruiser from 18 kilometres away, have you? Trust me, you load yourself up a Congo and you fire at an Omaha from 20 kilometres away and watch his health bar go and just delete him, and then you'll understand why people play battleships. All right? It's a kind of... when you load up the battleship, you start each game thinking, maybe this will be the game. And usually it isn't. You just get burnt to death by the cruisers, and destroyers are firing torpedoes at you from smoke screens that you can't see. And oh great, here come the torpedo bombers. But every now and then, the stars line up together, and you get that perfect set of multiple citadel salvos that just... that's why people play battleships. And to be completely fair, it's only really at lower tiers where the battleships are kind of vulnerable. At higher tiers, and I'm talking tier 8, 9 and 10, battleships dominate. Absolutely do. It's worth sticking with it if you enjoy the battleships. Who's next?
Hi there.
Got one over there.
2 questions. what possibly is the funniest thing you've seen happen on any of the replays you've had?
Oh,
And,
yes.
What are you looking forward to with the British battleship line?
Right. Okay, the funniest thing I've ever seen. That's a very, very easy one to answer. It was quite a while ago. I think it may even have been in the open beta of World of Warships. Somebody was in a destroyer, and they were closing in on an enemy carrier, trying to finish them off. And the carrier may have been the last ship left alive on the enemy team. And of course, the destroyer gets close. They start going into panic mode. You know, hands to panic stations. So he launches all of his aircraft. His flight deck was burning. He managed to put the fires out, launches all of his aircraft, and the destroyer. I might need a visual aid here. Get the old Judge Day stick out. The destroyer, the carrier was like here, heading that way. The destroyer came around this side, circled round in front of him. The carrier's aircraft came from that direction. Now, you know what happened next, don't you? Destroyer dodges the torpedoes sink the carrier that launched them. Oh, shit. Although, potentially a funnier one was in a very similar situation, and this time the carrier didn't torpedo himself, but he did manage to torpedo the friendly cruiser that was coming to aid him against the destroyer. And then the destroyer torpedoed him, so take your pick. Either one of those was hilarious. The second question, British battleships. Well, here's the thing. I'm kind of a little concerned about British battleships and World of Warships because look at what they've done with the cruisers. They basically turned them into destroyers with citadels. So I'm not entirely sure how they're going to handle the battleships. I get the impression that they want to try to make the British unique and more skill dependent than the other nations. I mean, American battleships are easy to play. It's impossible to citadel them, except for the Iowa and the Montana and South Dakota. And well, okay, you get the idea. But they're tough. You know, the New Mexico, the Colorado, they're very, very difficult to citadel. You can chip away at their health, but it takes a while to sink them. So any idiot can play an American battleship. But you've already seen what they're doing with the British cruisers. They're all light cruisers. They're very fragile, but they're very potent, if you're any good. Now, are they going to try to do the same thing with the British battleships? And how so? Because the British battleships were heavily armoured. British carriers as well took far less damage from kamikaze attacks in the Pacific because they had armoured flight decks. So, you know, the kamikaze would just hit the deck and bounce off. They put the flight deck out of action, but they could repair it within half an hour. Whereas the American carriers suffered. So, I don't know. I think I really have no idea what they're going to do with the British battleships. I mean, I probably have more contact with wargaming than most of the other community contributors, but there's things they don't even tell me. Sorry. Who's next?
Hello there. Firstly, can I say congratulations on your engagement? I'm sure some other people will think the same thing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Secondly, to take it off topic probably, and I'm sorry about this, you talked quite a bit about World War II, and out of all the naval actions and the commanders, admirals, people who have been there in World War II or World War I, there's people who always ask, what do you think was the most significant battle? To you, what was the most inspirational battle or story that's come out, or
well,
something like that?
I have to. I'm afraid I'm going to repeat myself here, but it's going to be the battle of. I really need to take myself out around the back and give myself a good slapping because I'm struggling to remember which actual battle it was. I think it may have been the Solomons, but it was when Task Force 3 was faced with a battle group, any one of which weighed more than the entire task force. And rather than just running away, they turned around and fought them and basically saved the invasion force. You know, those Marines, can you imagine if the Musashi had been able to turn those 18-inch guns onto the landing ships? It would have been a slaughter. I mean, you know, and these guys just did what needed to be done. The Joseph E. Porter, I forget the name of the destroyer, but it was unbelievable. The courage. Even the Japanese remarked upon it. And as I was saying, one of the Japanese destroyers, as this destroyer escort, I mean, it only had 4-inch guns. It's firing at a Yamato-class battleship with 4-inch guns. It's never going to do any damage, but they attacked them anyway. And this ship was going down, and the front gun turret was still firing as it went below the water. And the Japanese destroyer crews just lined the side of the ship and saluted them as they went under. You would never have seen that from the Japanese army. I mean, you know what happened if you got captured by the Japanese? If you were lucky, you were worked to death on the Siam Railroad. If you were unlucky, you got tied to a tree and used as bayonet practice. The Japanese Navy, on the other hand, while there were certainly incidents, I mean, there were incidents in every nation, but generally they behaved with a bit of honor. And again, the whole point of today's show, that for me is the reason why you're seeing so much pride in Japanese anime shows with regards to their Navy in World War II, because they do have something to be proud of. Who's next?
I'm getting there.
I didn't think I'd be able to keep going for an hour, but you know what I'm like. Start talking and I won't shut up. Yes.
I can't remember the name of the anime off the top of my head, but there's this anime where like this modern Aegis class, I think it's a cruiser. It's like
the Aegis is a cruiser,
yeah.
the Ticonderoga class cruisers, yeah.
Yeah, and it gets teleported back to that exact battle.
I don't think it's an anime.
It's an anime.
Is it?
There's another one with a carrier being sent back to Pearl Harbor.
Because there's a live action one.
Yeah,
that's the one I'm thinking of.
There's also an anime that's like this Japanese cruiser, and it gets sent back.
Somebody knows the name of the show you're talking about.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, that's a movie. That's the movie. It's called Final Countdown, the anime.
Yeah.
Japan, yeah, that's it. Japan, yeah. And basically, there's this amazing scene with the because they go back, they change history, and that battle never happens.
Yeah.
So the Yamato class battleship lines up to fire on the Marines, and this Aegis class destroyer destroys the shells in flight.
Yes, it can do that.
Yeah. And have you seen that? Have you seen it?
No, I thought I had, but I'm thinking of the live action movie that's similar.
I've been told the anime is called Zipang. I really think you should watch it.
I'm probably going to have to watch that now.
Yeah.
The thing is, I don't know if you're familiar with what the Aegis system on the American Ticonderoga class missile cruisers is actually capable of doing.
Yeah.
They've got phased array radar, but that's the data link that they use where they can basically take control of every surface-to-air missile system in the task group. And it's got the computing capacity to track and shoot down 300 different air targets at the same time. Can you imagine if one of those had been at Pearl Harbor? Just one. Wow. Anyway, yes, thank you. I'll look that one up. Who's next?
Yeah.
Hi, I want to ask, if World of Warships decides to introduce submarine warfare, what would be your opinion on it?
Right, okay. I don't think it's ever going to happen. Although there's a game called Steel Ocean on Steam. Now I get an email every week from somebody who I'm sure works for Steel Ocean. And the email is entitled Steel Ocean and Why You're Not Covering It. I'm not covering it because it's garbage. The game mechanics, well, I mean, you know, you like what you like. I like the idea that they had, however, with the way submarines could be made to work in something that's largely surface ship dominated. They've got a sort of an endurance bar, an oxygen meter, so they can't stay submerged the whole time. And they're very vulnerable on the surface, as they should be. And they can only stay submerged for a certain amount of time, and the torpedoes, blah, and so on and so on and so on. Is that ever going to happen in World of Warships? I do not think so, because they'd have to completely remodel all of the maps. Because the water in World of Warships is only 30 meters deep. You know, they'd have to scoop out the bottom of all of the maps in order to fit the submarines in there. And they have said, well, I don't know, Wargaming have said this is never going to happen, and then 6 months later it happens. But they have said they're never going to put submarines in there. I hope they don't, because imagine if you're in a battleship. Right? First of all, you've got those little bastards in destroyers blazing away at you, the Americans and the Soviets, from outside of spotting range. You're constantly on fire. Then the Japanese destroyers are closing in and lighting you up with torpedoes. You've got dive bombers and torpedo bombers coming in overhead. The cruisers have abandoned you. You've got no air cover. And then they add submarines. No, I can't see it ever happening. But if they were, they could look at Steel Ocean as a way of doing it. And Wargaming do look at other games for inspiration. I mean, you know, Armoured Warfare, does anybody play that? You've seen the way artillery works in Armoured Warfare, right? You know Wargaming are looking at that as an option for the artillery revamp that's coming in World of Tanks 2.0. They don't talk about their competitors, but they are watching them. Who's next? Sorry, did that answer your question? It did, okay.
In World of Warships, out of the two premium Tier 6 battleships, the Warspite and the Dunkirk, which do you think...
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
In World of Warships, out of the Warspite and the Dunkirk, which do you think is more fun to play?
Oh, the Warspite. Unquestionably. Here's the thing about the Dunkirk. All its guns are in the front. Now, that's good, because it means you don't have to worry about swinging the back end of the ship out to get the rear turrets firing and then getting citadeled in the side, which will happen if you try to do that in the Dunkirk because it's got terrible armor. Technically, it's a battleship, it's a battle cruiser. It's a heavily armored battle cruiser, but it's not a battleship. The other thing about the Dunkirk is the guns are horribly inaccurate, and they're horribly inaccurate because they're trying to pack 4 guns into the same turret. Now, you see that, and I think the King George V class British battleships, if you look at the front 2 turrets, the front turret has four guns, and the second turret only has 2. Now, why they didn't put 3 guns in each turret, if they wanted 6 guns up front, I don't know, because what happens when you've got those 4 guns packed right next to each other in the turrets is that it affects the accuracy, because the shells are so close together that the slipstream from the turbulence in the air around each shell forces the shells apart in midair. That's why if you look at the British cruisers, higher tier, like the Belfast is a perfect example. If you look at the guns, they've got three guns per turret, and the central gun is recessed. And that's exactly why they do that. It's so that that shell isn't going to interfere with the trajectory of the other 2. So that's a big problem with the Dunkirk. Now, I've had some great games in the Dunkirk, but they've been really boring, because all I do is sit at the back in about medium to maximum range with my front pointing towards the enemy battleships and shoot at them every, 26 seconds? And if they start getting closer, I reverse. If anything looks like it's getting around my side, I shoot at them, and then when there are no more threats on either side, I start moving forward and close in with the enemy battleships. And it's really boring. The Warspite, however, she's a tough old girl. She can take a kicking like the Dunkirk can't, and she's got those 15-inch guns. And yeah, right, you get a citadel on somebody with the Dunkirk, but they're only 320mm guns. You get a citadel with a 15-inch, and they know they've been hit. And also, it's got the coolest flag in the game. So, yay Warspite.
I'm afraid that was...
And I'm afraid that is all we have time for. However, I do believe we have some things that I can sign and give
Yes.
away. Here they are.
Yes, we will be moving jingles outside. So anyone would like to have his autograph? We have some special poster for you to take home.
They saw me playing Overwatch in an episode of Mingles with Jingles. Very badly, I hasten to add. Does anybody here play? Obviously, we've got the Overwatch cap here. Who's your favourite? Who likes Diva? Yeah? Come on, I was go on, Rita. Yeah, Rita was supposed to be wearing a Diva costume today. Unfortunately.
Oh, there's a Diva there.
Yeah, unfortunately, the headset. We got a Diva at the back there? Yes. Oh, look, Rita, her costume lights up. Shame. Yeah, Diva's my favourite. I normally play as either Diva or Mercy, because if you're crap, you can always play a healer. Have you noticed, why do the DPS always run away from the healers? Yeah, what do they think you're going to do to them? Anyway, and I play as Tracer, but very, very badly. And I usually have like one game as Tracer, suck, and then switch to Diva and kick ass. So yes, that's what this has been inspired by. They saw me playing Overwatch very badly in an episode of Mingles with Jingles. So, sorry. I mean, if you want to keep abusing the facilities and sitting and resting, by all means, carry on.
Thank you very much, guys. Give a nice big round of applause for the Mighty Jingles.
And thank you all. And I hope you enjoy the rest of Comic-Con. And if anybody does want to get an autograph, then we've got almost certainly more than enough for everybody who's here.